Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. How is it going? I see a lot of similar, familiar faces. Okay, we'll start in a couple of minutes. All right, all right. I think we have enough participants joined in. Give me 1 second. All right. Hello, everyone. So this is a community event. Welcome you all. Thanks for joining in on Saturday afternoon. I know you guys have a lot of things planned for the day, the group discussions and other activities. So we'll try to keep it as short and as crisp as possible. And so quickly, so you've been hearing this defending resume sessions, and few of you might have also been attending them as a part of your AlmaX program. So, what is it all about, and what are we going to discuss today? So, briefly, if we happen to see, in my overall program with AlmaX, a few questions that I get constantly asked is, what if I don't have an interesting project to talk about, and how much detail to provide when describing a data science project, or I have done a lot of hard work but I don't know how to engage the interviewer. So you might have faced a lot of similar questions in your head, and you might have happened to ask your career coaches or your mentors and try to understand what exactly do you speak, how do you put out, because there might be few projects that you might have done for a month and you might have lot of intricate nitty-gritty details to discuss about. There might be few projects that were just quick EDAs, or overall just understanding how to select the feature or the engineering part, basically a very small part of the entire data science lifecycle. So since all of you would be attending interviews or might be already attending interviews, so it's a good start that you have these similar questions in your head, and that is exactly what we're going to address today. So you're at the right event if that is something that resonates with you. Yeah. So, when we answer this, we're going to see how do we exactly do that in today's session. Like, I'm going to talk about a template or a structure you could use as a reference when describing your projects, and that is similarly what we discuss in our defending resume sessions in our career coaching classes. And this time we'll try to keep it different. We'll try to understand through an example. We'll try to understand through different narratives what works better, what doesn't, and what details should you keep in mind. And then we'll try to summarize this in a kind of a framework. So I think that's all about today. The only thing I'll ask you to do is stay till the end of the event to understand the whole picture, like the entire picture end to end, so that it is and do not mind taking notes or anything. We'll just share the content with you. Everything is noted down. Just try to focus, just try to understand, and ask as many questions as you like, right? So now let's jump right into how you can construct your answer, how to keep your audience engaged, and make sure like the interviewer understands the most important things you want to convey in your answers. Okay. All right. So quick heads up, we'll take the Q&As at the end of the session. So let's try to focus on the content right now. Okay. So I'm not sure, so these are few questions that I'm sure you might have resonate with. Say, my EDA project is not good enough, none of my project is impactful, or I have a student who always talks about, I don't know how to describe a boring project, although it's effective. The use case was important, but it's very boring. How do I explain this? So what we'll do is we'll start with a quick scenario, okay, where we'll talk about a project, say a classification or a regression project, and we'll see how two different narratives, two different of our Alma students did the same project, and how will they explain. All right. So let's take an example of the email campaign effectiveness. I'm sure few of you might have done this project or similar projects in your program with AlmaBetter. So what is this project about is, in short, if we say, it's about identifying the email campaign effectiveness. Basically, the task was to do a multi-level classification problem where you had to create a machine learning model to, say, characterize the email. When I say characterize the email, I mean you need to track whether the email was ignored or read or acknowledged by the reader. So why is it multi-label? Because there's not just two classification, it's three classes involved here. So let's assume for our easyability, we'll assume that ignored, read, and acknowledge is something, say, we'll give it a number, say 0, 1, 2. Okay. Now, our first student has done this project, and she is appearing for an interview, and she explains it in a way. So for fun sake, let's keep the first student's name as Emma. So Emma explains in a project that she goes by saying that, say, I happen to develop a multi-class XGBoost model, so to characterize the email creative and if predicted its effectiveness, whether it's ignored, read, and acknowledged. I performed missing value imputation using KNN imputer, implemented SMOD, and carried out hyperparameter tuning. Third, she said that she leveraged chat plots to identify the key model drivers. And fourth, she talked about the F1 score that she got. Now, our student was asked, she was a part of the, say, Almax, and her career coach asked her to keep it short and crisp. So she decided to go with this framework. Now, another student of ours was also given the same, I would say, guidelines. And say, for fun sake, again, let's keep the second student's name as Rachel. Now, Rachel also has done the similar project. What does she explain and how does she explain is, she says that, she starts with explaining the business problem. She says a couple of lines there where she helps the interviewer understand that, the ultimate way to get to know the audience or build upon what works, eliminate what doesn't, make a strategy out of all of this is something that I tried to achieve through identifying the email campaign effectiveness or track how my email marketing did. She starts with a business problem. She joins it with, say, she then starts helping the interviewer to visualize the data set. She says that, the data set of mine comprised 12 features, primarily around the, say, the email, the content of the email, and then the type of the campaign or the demographic details of my customers. And my target variable was email status, where it might be either read or acknowledged or ignored. So she helped visualize the data set. Then she tried giving an overview in, say, a couple of lines, because again, she was also asked to keep it short. Now, she said that, through EDA, I understood that the ratio of my email status was same respective of the time frame. So she did few quick EDAs, then we do feature engineering. Let's imagine the data science lifecycle that we try to apply in our projects. We do the EDA, then feature engineering, selection, and then we jump to the model creation part, and then the evaluation part of our models. And there might be a few projects that you might have tried to deploy it on, say, Flask or other APIs, Heroku, and all of those things. So that is, again, something if you would have done, you would say about it. So she said that, through EDA, I realized this, then I imputed my missing values, then I performed label encoding, then I applied and experimented with three models. And through experimentation, I understood that my winning model is XG Boost because it's robust to outliers, and it performed good when I hyperparameterized it. And the results were FN score of 89 to 84% with train and test. So she gave a business problem. She helped visualize the data set. She gave an overview of the project. Now she's talking about the impact. Like, say, in a couple of lines, she mentioned that, if the I realized that if campaign type was one, or say, in other words, if it was say a promo campaign, or say a daily sale campaign or something, there is 90% likelihood that that email would be opened. And she tracked the performance and estimated an overall increase in the customer acquisition. Now, just right after what she did, she just helped connect the dot and help the audience understand, or the interviewer understand, that what she did has an impact on this. Like, since childhood, we might be hearing about, see, whatever you do has an equal and opposite reaction. So immediately right after the action, she mentioned what was the impact. She could solve the right content to right audience. So now, let's connect the dots. She was actually working on the email, identifying the effectiveness of the email campaign, and then she jumped to the like the how she did it, why she did it, and then now what was the impact of that project. And then she talked about the challenges, like, she just talked about the I understood that the proper way to handle the imbalance was, it was a quite a big decision, because I couldn't understand the trade-off between information loss or risk of overfitting. We'll not get into the details, because we are all aware that what smart does, what is the like, the risk of it, and what does the undersampling techniques or a ensemble technique of oversample and undersample would do. So she just tried to put out one few challenges out there, which could make sense to the interviewer, that, I happen to do this, this is what I faced. And now she ended it with a good note, that, I understood, or through this I have learned something new, or say I learned how to deploy or leverage short chat plots in my entire project. Or she talks about the data, that the entire data that she might have received, and she got a very interesting insight that, say, the word count, as soon as you increase the word count by, say, 600 mark, nobody is going to open the email, or even if it is open, nobody is going to read it, because again, it's a huge message and nobody likes to read long messages. The more short and crisp you keep your email campaigns, the better it is. So she tried understanding and creating an ideal mark for the, like, the end result or the insight findings. Now, there were two ways to describe the same project. One was she kept it very short and crisp. The other was, say, she tried explaining it through a process where she could draw every component and create a story out of it. There was a narrative in that. So which one do you think made a better, or gave a clearer idea? Did Emma give a better idea, or the Rachel? So Rachel is the second student and Emma is the first one. Feel free to drop in your chats and help me understand which one did a better job. You think Rachel did a good job, or you think Emma was short and crisp, but she gave all the idea in just 4 lines, and it was amazing to just hear that. All right, so a lot of you are saying Rachel. All right, but there are few people who go by Emma, like, right. Oh, interesting. So there is a 50-50 probability of people going with Emma and people going with Rachel. Emma has given technical information. You're right, Deepak. Yes. All right. So in our audience, we have 50-50 people going by student one and student two's narratives. Now, let's cut to the like the template side, or let's understand this and put this in a bigger picture. So Emma has a lot of technical stuff that she gave out, and she stuck to the script that her career coach has made her understand, that, try to keep as short as possible. Now, the interview, in any interview that you appear for, or you might have been giving few interviews, you would understand that there is no fixed timeline that you are given when you talk about the project. Say if an interviewer asks about so that's a very common question in every interview that you're going to ask, that could you explain a project of yours, or choose any project that you are really proud of or you are very confident upon and start speaking about it. All right. Now, when you start speaking about it, you are not aware where you would be given like 20 minutes to talk about it or just 2 minutes. Because when an interview comes to the platform, or the interview, he happens to have a set of narrative or the questions that he might already think that I could ask. Say you are applying for an associate data scientist or a data engineer role, he would have a set of questions in his mind based on the project that you are being recruited for. Now, say suppose if you would have started with just simple, like say you would have started and just gave in the details, like I built an XD boost, I did this, which our Emma did, right? She just happened to understand that she just gave in all the details because she thought that the more technical words or the more technical details I would give, it's better. Now, say suppose the interview that happened to come was a data science manager. He wasn't actually interested in knowing what you did. He was more interested in knowing how could you fit this piece of project that you did or the task that you did in a bigger picture. How would that add value to the business? That is something that he wants to know, rather than him knowing that you used missing value imputation for the KNN. Yeah, aapne, you did smart boosting just for say oversampling the entire data set. So how do you know this? So again, whenever there is of course you would know that the interviewer himself might have introduced, and you would know that, oh, he's a technical person or he's a managerial person, but there is always a lot of guesses around it. So the better way, again, let me, right. So now the better way, or try to understand that irrespective you don't know who's the audience, we'll consider we don't know who's the audience, we'll consider we don't know how much time we have to explain our project. How do we go about it then? So rather than I wouldn't say Emma's approach is also amazing, or I wouldn't say or right or wrong, or I wouldn't say Rachel's approach is also right or wrong. We'll try to keep the entire goal or the key is to a give out the most important information that you want to convey in a shorter period of time, and b, you need to engage your audience. You say you would have started like Emma, that you would have talked about those 4 lines and you would have been like, okay, and this is my project. You would have left lot of haywire. Like I don't know, like XGBoost, there are you guys know that there are lot of classifiers that could be used on a multi-label classification problem. XGBoost is just one of them. Now, I don't know why you chose the model. I don't know why it's a winning model. I don't know what all experiments you did. I don't know that did you just copy the code from Quora, or say anywhere, or did you just actually did it? So I was not aware that what was the data. I couldn't visualize it. I couldn't understand how did you fit that in a business problem. So let's break it down. How do we actually talk about it? The only thing that we need to keep in our mind is 5 questions. 5 questions, try to answer them in 5 lines, or you try to answer them in say a 20-page answer. Irrespective of that, irrespective of the time, irrespective of the audience, try to understand why did you do that project in the first place. Like Emma, on the other hand, never told us that why she did it. She said what she did. She clearly mentioned her results. She clearly mentioned her how she did it, but she never made her understand that what exactly was she trying to solve. Why did she choose this project in the first place? And even if she chose, what impact did it have? Like she just did it for the sake of coding, or did she do it just to solve a problem? Data science is all about solving problems through coding, through mathematical or statistical imputations. So what exactly you do is the first question you ask yourself is, why would you do that? Ask yourself, why would you choose this project? What will happen through that? How do you do it? And then what impact will it have? How do you do it has n number of ways to do it. Like you and I would have been working on the same project, but for me, I think KNN imputer for missing values is something that I wouldn't want to choose. Say I would just impute it by mean, and if our mode, irrespective of the column, I would want to go with this method. So there's no right or wrong in data science. Of course, we all know that it's all about experimentation, hit and trials. But if I answer this question and I ask what is it, why did I do it, what was the data set that I had, how did I do it, and the challenges involved, this itself is, if you understand this, you can just create a story, a narrative that is so easily relatable that even your mom can understand this entire story, just because you explained her what exactly was the sequence of events you happen to do. So when we talk about this and we don't know the entire time, if you want to like summarize this in a better way, it's just that talk about your goal, talk about the more context, and then impact. The minute you go into the more details, you are not sure that is the interviewer actually listening to you or not. How do you know that you've lost the interviewer, or is he actually listening, or is there any interest from his side? So what we usually I suggest people is, whenever you talk about your goal, you give little context about it. Say let's take another example. uh, Say the goal of the project was you wanted to improve the customer retention. That's the goal of the project, very short and simple. How did you do it is basically you introduced a a feature in your product. Say you were working for Zomato and your task was to improve the customer retention. What did you do? You introduced the ETA feature in your app for the deliveries. The minute you introduce the PDA, the impact was it increased the customer retention by 50%. Say, going back in 4 years back, say Zomato and Swiggy, nobody gave us the ETA. It was just something that, your food would be delivered as soon as the restaurant's ready. So now giving the ETA, you increase the customer retention by 50%. So now I am hooked on it. Like, how did you do it? What did you do it? Like, I am also facing the similar problem. What was your approach? This is where you generate interest of the audience, or you generate interest of your interviewer. And then once you're you talk about it in a shorter way, you then ask the interviewer whether, do you want me to go into the details of the project? Do you want me to talk about a particular part? Or say, I'll pause here just to see if you have any questions. So try to keep the context very short in the start, and then describe whatever the interviewer wants you to talk about more. And if the interviewer is like, no, I think I'm good, let's jump on to the next project, that is when then you talk about the next project, and you've not lost the interviewer there. But say he happens to say that, he or she happens to say that, yeah, why don't you talk more about it, like I want to know more. So then you talk about the challenges or the insights or the takeaways. Now again, how do you decide that? So now you've generated the interest of the interviewer. Now the interviewer's ears are more about, you increase their customer retention by 50%. Now, how did you do it? Is basically, again, you put in your, again, some impactful key insights that you put in there. So you could talk about the challenges, or you could talk about the insights. Say you talk about the challenges. Again, whenever you talk about the challenges, you have to think in mind that I have to keep it short. Keeping short, concise, and engaging. Three words let's try to take away from here is, because you're not writing a report or you're not reading out a report, you're trying to help the interviewer understand every step that you did, and that's exactly how you want to keep him hooked or not. So when you talk about the challenges, again, don't just start with a lamba chauda process where you've made him understand that so many technical challenges I had faced, so many non-technical. Again, do not get into the nitty gritties, just try to keep it at a high level overview of what you exactly faced. Now it can be a mixture of technical and non-technical. Again, when we say non-technical, it covers wide variety. Try to keep it short. Like right now we worked in projects in AlmaBetter in groups, right? So now we talk about the groups. Say, the coordination was difficult, or say the leadership who or the decision making was difficult, because say two classifiers were giving almost similar results. We didn't know to decide whether which one is overfitting. So you can talk about one or two challenges in the non-technical side, and in the technical side we have huge problems. So just to give you an idea, maybe you can talk about the different say success matrix, or you talk about the huge data set that might have been provided, and there you didn't have enough GPU or processing power to handle this entire bigger data set. So you could talk about that. Dealing with a huge data set is a very, very common problem that anybody faces. And how did you deal with it is the question, right? Everybody wants to know, how do you deal with big data sets? So, and then maybe you might have problem with the parameterizing of your models or other ways. Again, the key is to keep it short. Try to keep a mixture of non-technical, technical in just one to two or maybe two to three challenges. Why challenges? Again, it's not just about challenges, because the interviewer in like understand the mindset of the interviewer. He's there just to see if you can deliver, if you can provide a real impact in the project. Are you somebody who's going to do a mundane task जो 25 लोग और कर रहे हैं group में, or are you going to actually make a real impact? Because that's how I would want to recruit you, right? Based on what value you get to the table. So it's not about what you did and क्या हुआ था तुम्हारे लाइफ में और तुम्हारे प्रोजेक्ट में, और क्या, he doesn't want to hear your sad story. He wants to hear what challenges you faced and how did you solve them, just to understand how can you step in the project and help the team out. So that's the entire objective. Should I hire him? Will he be a good fit, or will she be a good fit in my team? That's the only two questions that the interviewer comes in the mindset for. Now, when you talk about challenges, you're not just talking about challenges, you're telling him that or her that you are a problem solver and you can happen to, irrespective of the challenges, you can solve the problem. Second is basically, it just gives out that you are a well qualified. The minute you explain the project challenge and you explain how you did an impact with, it's just, it just gives out the real impact or the real value for you, rather than you advertising yourself for. And of course, it just keeps the interviewer engaged. Like the minute you say that, I dealt with a huge data set, that just rings a bell in my head ki, oh, so how did you solve it? How did you happen to uh, maybe not make loss of information, but again, how did you use this? You didn't have GPU enough processing power. How did you solve it? So this is where my ears are out there, and I want to ask more questions. So every time I happen to talk to my students in the career coaching classes, we just discuss that how do you keep an effective pitfalls for you. Like, see, the minute you talked about the challenge, that is when you actually dug a grave for you, and that is where you want the interviewer to ask you more questions. So rather than interviewer going through his narrative, jo he has come and he's come and thought about ki, I'm going to ask these set of questions for a junior data engineer role. But the minute you gave your own narrative, you have just driven the conversation around it. You happen to talk about it in a way that you want the conversation to be going around for the next 30 minutes or 1 hour interview. So try to keep strategic pitfalls, and challenges are the best way to keep those pitfalls, because the minute you talk about challenge, expect a lot of questions around them. So you only talk about those challenges where you might have been very confident and you would have actually faced it and you know how to solve it. Say, you the problem was you didn't have a robust classifier that could take in lot of outlier data sets. Like your data set might have had a lot of outliers. You don't know which one would be a robust way. So that might be a challenge for you. Now he'll ask you, what do you mean by robustness of a classifier? What do you mean by outliers? How do you deal with outliers? Say if this is the scenario, how do you deal? So you have just given them very strategically a few keywords where you also talked about your challenge, real challenge, but again you try to drive the conversation that, oh, now you can ask me about all of these questions if you want. So that definitely, the minute you try engaging the interviewer, that helps you to stop over talking. Like right now I have been continuously talking. I'm sure this might be informative is the reason why you were listening, but say you might have lost me in the minute or two if I wouldn't have given you eventful insights, or say the minute I start giving tips, everybody's ears start getting up. So you know what exactly, oh, I should note this down. But minute I would just go in a rote learning way, and this is the framework, S stands for situation, task, T stands for task, and you just note it down. It gets annoying. It gets, you start to zone out and you start to think about the other things in your day. Rather than that, the minute you stop over talking and you pause and you ask the interviewer that do you want me to get into details, or do I'll pause here to see if you have any questions, and you address their questions. The minute you do all of these things in the start of the 15 minutes of your interview itself, the interviewer knows that you are here to talk, so he will not lose you in any moment later, because he also wants to be sounding at least convincing to you that I am legit interviewer, and you would also have a two-way conversation around it. So it just gives out a good signal to the interviewer that you are not just a individual contributor, but you can be a part of the team. So the entire interview, whenever you talk about your technical part, you talk about the non-technical parts, or you talk about your educational or your certifications or your interest areas, you try making a conversation. How do you do that is first try to understand and engage the interviewer, and that is how you can then try. Say you in your first project you've understood that he's more interested in the technical part rather than the what was the business impact, what was the findings, or what was your takeaway. Rather than that, he's more interested in why XGBoost, why is that your winning model. So you've understood a tone, you've understood a pattern, and then you can in your next project say you can use the same pattern to just help him resonate your answers in a better way. So that's the major reason why you should always have an engaging content with your again, why do you want to overstop talking? Because the interviewers might lose attention, they may miss the interesting parts. So take pauses, refine your project as we discussed, based on you understand the tone of the interviewer, and then based on that you understand that whether you need to delve into the level of details, or you want to keep it at a high level and just tell him about the technical part. Say in the interview, let's take an example that a junior data scientist in role that you've applied for, and say a data scientist comes and takes your interview. Now if a data scientist comes in, you share more technical details, but if a data science manager comes in, or a hiring manager or a project manager comes into the picture, you try to share more non-technical aspects and help him understand that the thing that I did actually could impact the business by say 50% of your customer retention is something that I can bring to the table, and that is something that I've already worked upon. So the minute you try giving details around what your audience wants, you have already won the battle. Like half battle is already won there by just talking about what they want to hear, rather than you telling them that, oh, so many things I've done, but you need to listen to my every detail what I want to say. Rather than doing that, it's always better to tailor your project details according to it. So again, just to summarize, the framework should primarily include the goal, more context, pause, take pauses in between, try to understand if the interviewer is more interested in the feature engineering part, or is he more interested in the model creation or the deployment side. Try to understand and help him understand through a couple of lines or a couple of insights that that was the impact that you could see. Talk about the challenges, because again that is something that you would want to him to understand where could you step in and provide value. Talk about the key takeaways. Never end your conversation or your interview or your narrative of the project with a sad note like I didn't have enough data set. No, is the reason why I couldn't do it. Not really. In most of my project description discussions that I have with students, we start with I was provided data set by AlmaBetter where we were supposed to do this. You were never supposed to do that. You actually chose the project. If the interviewer doesn't know about AlmaBetter or what you've learned in AlmaBetter, so you, rather than talking about this was the data set that AlmaBetter gave me, talk about why did you choose that data set. Maybe it might be a web scrape data set, or maybe it might be something that was say taken through an api, or it was just a csv file. Irrespective of that, the interviewer doesn't know that you have been provided. Rather than saying that I happen to use this data, this was my data. When you talk about the data, you don't need to say there were 30 to 40 features. You don't talk about this was the feature, then this, then say the email status time, then the time the email was sent, then the time the email was read. Not really. Maybe you can talk about at a very high level that the email, it was content details, it was campaign details, campaign type, it was more about the demographics of the data of the customer, say the customer location or the age, salary, or something of that sort, that help you understand. So always talk about the data at a high level, and avoid using words like, I happen to get data from AlmaBetter. No, why did you do it is the question. So talk about the goal, talk about with the context of the data, talk about how is that, what you did and how did that impact. I used a XGBoost and that is how I impacted. So try drawing a string between different components of your part and creating a story that is relatable to the audience. That's what we can summarize in our entire takeaway from this framework. Now, why not star method? Again, for people who are not aware of what is star method, star method is basically, we use and we've been guided. Like when I started, my career, or when I started my path, I was from my seniors. I was guided that always use a star method. Star is basically situation, task, action, and result. A good approach, a very good approach, I would say, where you talk about the situation that you were in, what task did you take up, what was the action that you did, and what was the result. It's a very nice approach in a very structured way. But again, going back to our problem of we don't know how much time we have to explain the project. So funny story, a friend of mine actually happened to go to an interview. He explained the situation, or he explained the business problem for say 5 minutes. Because he was working on a medical domain, he wanted to give the right context to the interviewer, because the interviewer was from a retail background. Now, to explain his project, he thought I will rather fill in the details of the what the medical domain faces the problems, and then he'll talk about it. Guess what? By the end of his explaining of the medical domain itself, the interviewer gave him a hard stop, and he asked him to jump on to the next project or something that he had in his mind. So he never even got to talk about what he did. He never got to talk about what was the real impact or the result of that project. And he just missed all the important information. So going through the star approach might give you a structured way, but always think about how do you first give the impact. If you give the impact, like we discussed, the customer retention and the introducing of the ETA for deliveries, and the minute you said that, the minute you mentioned that, it improved the customer retention by 50%. In short, you have given the entire story. Now if the interviewer is interested, he will delve into it. When you ask him more questions like should I get into the details and all, you will actually help him understand that, oh, these are few things that I would want to know. And then the interviewer himself throws into the pool and asks you that why don't you explain me about why did you choose XGBoost and other classifiers, say for example. So if you go by star method, we don't know how much time is given, so we might not be able to share our impact. Share your impact first, share your findings, share your insight, share your takeaway first. And then, going through our framework, it's always flexible. You can, you're talking about the goal, you're talking about the impact, you're talking about the challenges or the key takeaways. The minute you understand the interview's interest, you can go back to any of these parts and talk about it in a more better format, rather than going by ye kiya to ye ho gaya. You never know कि story कहाँ शुरू हुई कहाँ complete हुई, and then you would never understand that how would you fit that as you as a contributor in that. So share details based on the questions, on the feedback that you get. Hence not star method is something that we can approve of. Now, a very very important aspect of things that I happen to address in my career coaching classes is most of our students actually talk about that we've done our projects in groups. So Ekta, I'm not sure that I just did the EDA part. I'm not sure how the model works. The minute I start asking questions about the chaplots, everybody is like, I never actually worked on the model. The model was say Charishma's part or Swati's part. I was just a part of say doing the EDA side. So I'm worried how will I explain this project to the interviewer. I have just taken how did you write it on the resume then? Because I've been given sample resumes. I picked up pointers from there and just added my few own thoughts and just updated my resume. How would you package this task? How would you just sell your project, or how do you talk about it? So a lot of my students ask me these questions like, it's just the EDA or it's just that part. So all I have to give in suggestion is zoom out that part and think about a bigger picture. Like say you were the only one, say you did an Airbnb booking analysis and you understood that you have understood where should you invest more, or which city or which host does a better job. That's only insight that you got through your EDA. How do you zoom it and tell this task as an important task in your entire project? Because again, too much detail is distracting and boring, but you might have also lost if you don't give in too much detail, or maybe if you don't talk in detail, you might lose on a lot of important stuff. So let's take an example. Okay, let's take um all right, so a friend of mine again, she was appearing for a data scientist role, and she happened to talk about that, Ekta, I had been looking at the log data from the last 6 months. So now I want to appear for an interview that I am very excited about, a role that is exactly, I feel that that is for me. But I don't know how to talk about my project to the hiring manager, because again, I've just been looking at the logging data of an experiment in the last 6 months. How do I talk about that project? So I happened to ask her a few questions, just quick questions around how what she did. So I asked her, what data were you evaluating and analyzing? She said that, it contained results of an online experiment. Like, to give you an example, what were the tests around, say, color of the button in an app? That was my basically my task, to see the results of a hypothesis testing that we did. So, say I was supposed to just look at the significance value, the alpha. I was supposed to compare it with the test statistics, and that's exactly what I just did overall. So, as I asked her, why do you need to validate the data? She said, well, because we need to have reliable data in order to make that decision to launch that feature or not. So why do you need to validate test statistics, compare it with, say, z score, compare it with the alpha or the significance? How do you decide the significance? In some scenarios you might have seen that 0.05 is the best benchmark. In some scenarios in real life you would see that 0.02 is also something that we can work with. Or you might understand in that Gaussian distribution it's just very strict and it wants to be kept at 0.08. Say that is something that you would want to go. Again, who decides that, and how do you compare? That's exactly what you did. So I asked her, why do you need to validate this data? And she said that the minute you understand and you can compare these, I can help the product team take a decision whether they should launch this feature or not. Then I asked her, why is this feature important for the launch? She said that it has a potential to change a business metric significantly. Say the business metric was something that, will the customer order or not, just based on the color of the button. Now, I tried to understand her situation, and I said, awesome. So, all you did was analyze the data, and maybe basically you just had to take a decision whether it is an important feature, or should that feature be launched or not. So how do you say this? How do you explain this? In a nutshell, she can talk about that the project is critical to shift business metric. The data quality is critical to decision make to make a decision, and she was in charge of a very she was in charge of obtaining reliable data. Data in itself is a big challenge. When you talk about the medical data set or any of these data sets, they are all fragmented, they are all in silos. Getting them, creating a master data set and just comparing the result, she had an actual important job to do, and that was very impactful. So overall she just helped them understand that, although it was a mundane task, although it was a very boring job just to every day look at the logging data and see, that makes sense, this is better than this. She to just do her job quickly, she might have just downloaded it on Excel and created few rules that, the minute alpha is greater than test statistics or something like that, I would just take away and decide that this feature is important or not. So it might be mundane for you, it might be a very tedious or a boring job for you, but it can, if you can draw a conclusion and help the interviewer or anybody understand what was the impact you took out of it, you've already done the job. You've already helped them understand how can you help the project or the team build up a entire product or a launch, right? So I think, to conclude, I would just say that, before you jump into any of your interview or you appear for interview, first understand your audience, because that is one part that you can solve. Because remember, in this chart we discussed, we have two problems. We don't know who's our audience, we don't know who's the interviewer, we don't know how much time we have to explain every project of ours, or how much time we have to answer any question. So now to solve the first part, how do you know your audience? So the minute the HR or any recruiter helps you, that so and so date you have an interview, you happen to have an invite, you happen to see the name of the interviewer, you do a quick LinkedIn research on this person and just try to understand whether he's a technical, he's a non-technical guy, whether he's more interested in project management and fitting you as a resource in different projects, or just trying to understand your skill set and match it to the project requirements. Who is this person? How do I keep my answers in front of him? How do I um, make him understand my important task that I have done? So the minute you know your audience, you have your story, you know what part you need to include or exclude. You cannot just be going by Emma's approach or Rachel's approach. You know that a mixture of both of them is something that you would want to understand and craft your story around. The minute you craft your story, we discussed, it's just, you given details in a very effective manner where you just talk about one or two insights, and then you generate interest, and you generate pitfalls for you where you would want the interviewer to ask you questions. Because the minute you create a story, you select your insight, that is when you can entirely sketch the story, like starting from the business goal to the impact, to the challenges, to the key takeaways. You just draw an entire story end to end, and it's very relatable to me as compared to just being Emma or just being Rachel. So overall, now you've created a narrative. Lot of my students think that explaining the project is just a cakewalk for me, Ekta, because I've been working on it since last 1 2 months. So I'm very much aware I don't have to prepare on the interview. You tell me what all questions will be asked in the data science interview, let's practice that. Let's do that. But again, being prepared with your narrative, with your project, is always a better idea, because a lot of students fail there, and they might not fail the interviews, and they might not even know that this was the reason. I immediately reject students who doesn't help me understand what data set were they actually dealing with. Understand the entire point of appearing for a data science interview is not for you to showcase how much technical knowledge you have, or how many classifiers you know, or how many regressors you know. It's all about, do you understand the data? Can you understand the problem that is in hand? Because that is exactly what you need to solve. And if you just talk about your coding skills, or your the overall tasks that you've done, you've not given the interviewer entire signals whether you can fit in the team or not, because you will just be considered as a coder, or you will just be considered somebody who can do EDA and create charts. Oh, she's good at visualization, she'll just do charts. Do you want to do those tasks, or do you want to actually create an impact, is what you need to ask yourself before you sit for any interview. And again, practice as much as you can. The minute you create a you sketch a data story around your around your projects, you need to practice as much as you can. And the minute you've practiced enough, based on the audience, you can just take out few information, you can put in few information, you can add, subtract your narrative according to who your audience is. So it's just a cycle of process. The minute you practice, the minute you know your audience, it's just a roadmap that you should follow every time, just to create a effective data story across. Again, I've been speaking for a long time, and I'll pause here just to see if you guys have any questions, and feel free to drop in your Q&A or your chat, and let me find this as much as you can. All right, so I see a lot of hand raising. So meanwhile, whenever you guys feel free to put in your questions, I will just take in few questions from the chat. Okay. So Deepak asks, if you're demonstrating in college project, then what should be our project? If you're demonstrating in college project, what should be your project? Again, irrespective of the college, irrespective of the interview, irrespective of applying for a job, all you have to think is a way to convey it. Again, when you talk about the college, understand your audience. Your audience here is not somebody who's been working in the production environment. Your audience here is somebody who's also learning data science along you. So you need to keep your content in a way that is understood by the folks around, by not somebody who's talking about what you did, what were the challenges in the Flask or the Heroku entire ecosystem, but you talk about actually what was the data, what did you do, how did you deal with the missing values. Talk about the nitty gritties where you need to help the audience relate to you. So again, if you look at the roadmap that is here, you'll understand that based on your audience, you can craft your data story. I hope, Deepak, that answers your question. How do we reduce fear of interview? Diksha asks us. How do we reduce fear of interview? Again, going back to the roadmap. Practice, write, record your speech as much as you can, and do as much as, speaking in front of the camera or in front of the mirror, and practice as much as you can. Very simple. Can I only, SK asks, can I only present only EDA project in a data science interview? Because I believe I'm good at explaining it. Absolutely. That's exactly what we discussed. However mundane, however small task that you had, if you can help understand how did it fit in the bigger picture, on the whole picture, it's always a good idea. And trust me, EDA, feature engineering, feature selection is the majority of the task in real life production environment. So you need to understand how do you fit in and what was the real value you give. Okay. So Neeraj asks, if I have done any project earlier, but after submitting my resume, I realized that project could have been done in a better way. Interesting. So can I say that in an interview, I should defend whatever I have written? Neeraj, this always will happen. This will always happen that, you submit your resume, you are the biggest critic to yourself. So trust me, if you've actually done the project, every time you read your resume, you will find few or the other details like, oh, this is not complete, or I should have written it in a complete format or something. Every time this will happen. So not every time you can change it, but before giving an interview, there is always, like, just a night before as well, you can give the recruiter that, or the HR who had actually conducted or scheduled this interview, that, I've just updated my resume and this is my updated resume, can you share this with the hiring partner or hiring manager, and this is something that I would like to discuss. There is always a chance just before the interview. Or even if you want to do these changes while you start the interview, you can just talk about it and tell the interviewer that, I have made few changes in my resume and I would like you to ask me questions on this updated one, and send them across immediately. There is never a wrong timing for that. You can always do that. All right. Roshan asks how to justify the model scores if they are average or below average. Good question. I see a lot of exaggeration in the resumes that we make. Like, say the F1 score was 92%, 95%. The minute you do this, and you might think that you're acting very smart and, wow, your project actually did that. Or say, even if your project actually did that, let's assume that it is a true number that you gave. You are just alerting the interviewer so much that, is this some random Kaggle clean data set that this person has picked up, or is this really? The minute you give them the real scores or below average or average scores, that is when you actually explain and help them understand that it is for real, because that's exactly what we faced. Can you believe, we were right now working for a CPG company where we had to, there was a time series problem where they were, through their SaaS software, they were actually getting a accuracy of, say, 35% or something, and we happen to increase it, say, by 52%. 52% is something that they accepted, that, oh, it's much better than what we had. Can you believe, can you agree that 52% is a good number? Maybe not, but maybe for that industry, maybe for that data, it is how it is. So it's always better to, just stay true, and you don't really need to, justify that. All right. Deshant asks, hi ma'am, I know machine learning algorithms, like how it works, mathematics used, but during interview, how can I explain it to the interviewer precisely? Again, Deshant, keep testing your waters. Keep testing that, how much the interviewer wants to know. If, say, again, like we explained, say, he's a individual contributor. When I say individual contributor, somebody who's a not a decision maker, somebody who does that tasks every day. say that person would want to know how you did it, but say the other person would be more interested in knowing how exactly did you fit that into bigger picture. So if it is mathematics, if it is machine learning algorithm, or the algorithmic black box that you not need to discuss, it is always based on how much the interviewer wants to know. You try to give in a high level, always start with a high level overview, and then say you get into the details if there is more questions around it. Keep asking, the interviewer wants to know more or not. The minute you just start with your narrative and you never stop and you just non-stop talk about it for say 5 to 10 minutes, you've lost the game. You've lost the game, guys. All right. A lot of you are asking, will I share the interview, will I share the presentation? For sure, you are going to have this presentation, so do not worry about it. You will have the entire framework in front of you. All right. I have a lot of hand raised. I will allow Ritik to talk because I've been talking for a long time and I would want you guys to. Hey, Yashank, can we allow Ritik to talk? Yes, I think. Hey, Ritik, you want to talk about something?
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you so much for this wonderful session. I wanted to ask, I'm a fresher. First of all, I'm still in the university. However, I have fair hands-on experience in data science. I've been working in it for over the past 3 years. But what happens is, this is something that I feel, when you say that you have to have a fair understanding of the data, like because I'm a fresher, I'm a sheer fresher, so I do not have experience by my side. So all that I could do is use my intuition and then try to understand from that perspective. Like find this data set might be used in that sense, or for example, I could do only a number of things with that data set. This is how I approach like working on a data set. Now, when you say, ma'am, that you have to have a fair understanding of the data set, I want to know that what, according to you, is that understanding? Because I get confused when you say that you have to know the data set, you have to understand it well, but I do not understand how much do I have to understand.
Right. Good question there, Ritik. I understand this is something that overwhelms everybody. How much data? Because again, whatever data that you might have received can be interpreted in a number of ways. For you, you could have done, say, let's take about the same example that we were discussing earlier, the customer retention, or say the email campaign effectiveness that you wanted to, measure, that classification problem.
Yes,
Now,
ma'am.
again, how much data that we want to look into, say for you, the business problem would be, how do I improve the satisfaction of the customers, or how do I improve the loyalty? Maybe the success metric for you might be, how do I improve the loyalty? Maybe the success metric for me would be, how do I improve the retention? Maybe for say Charishma, it would be, say, how do I reduce the churn rate of the customers? So so a lot of different business metrics can be defined. Again, that could be one of the challenge that you can talk about in the interview, that I was unable to define or prioritize my success metric, but this is something through my understanding is what I could take, or through this campaign effectiveness, if I want to tie it back to what objective or what impact it does, maybe this is my understanding. So again, when you talk about coming from a sheer fresher background, which I think most of us here are, I would say it is more about, I understand that there is no fair understanding of the industry, but at least there is fair understanding of what you are doing through the data. And again, coming back, you can interpret it in a n number of ways, but you would want to keep it in the interview in a way that what you understood, were your thoughts, because it's not something that it's a universal problem and a universal solution. It is interpreted problem and an interpreted n number of solutions. So it's always better to put what you understand, and it's no boundary that you should consider that इतना तो data explore करना ही चाहिए मैंने. There is no particular boundary. If that is something that is insightful to you, it solves the objective that you were trying to solve, I think it's fair enough. You don't have to go and delve into every details, every nitty-gritty. How much did the email status time? Is the time important, or of the email sending, or is the demographics important? What customers am I sending? So all depends on how much you want to dwell and how much you want to talk about it. But at the end of the day, when you talk about it in the interview, it's more about Your business objective, how did you do it? How did you solve that problem? That is more important than just every nit and gritty of it has to be explored.
Got
Does
it,
that
ma'am.
answer
So
your question?
depends on the individual and does not have any thumb rule.
There is no thumb rule. There is no thumb rule.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. I'll ask to unmute you. All right. Okay, Aman asks, thank you so much for a wonderful session. Thank you so much for joining in. How to deal with all the whys sometimes while building a model. We use hit and trial kind of methods like switching between models. And sometimes we don't have an answer why XGBoost works best here, whereas the data we might also perform best with gradient boost. Amazing question. So, every time you learn about the algorithm, say you just wanted to experiment with adder boost, or something new that you've learned is cat boost, and you want to experiment and compare its results with respect to say XG boost. Now the question is, you never just learn about the algorithm, you never just learn about the mathematics, but you also learn about the pros and cons. I think we had been discussing a lot of these in our instructorship sessions as well, in your everyday classes, that what's the pro and con of this particular XGBoost. Say XGBoost, you just try to there is no way that you can understand every algorithm and everything, but when you are very clear and you talk about them, that I know about XGBoost, I know about cat boost, I know about adder boost, these are the few regressors that I know, or these are the few classifiers that I know. If you are very clear and keep it in the interview, try, when you say these things, try to understand not just the algorithm or the mathematics, but also understand the pros and cons. In which way would that fit better? XGBoost works better if it is robust. It is robust to outliers, it is robust to minority data or something. It is robust to oversampling. So understand the pros and cons of every algorithm that you tend to have worked upon. You need not know all the algorithms in this world, but you need not just delve into the mathematics. Try to understand the pros and cons. That would all automatically answer your question that why XGBoost worked better for you, or similar results, train and test, say almost similar accuracy that you got with say gradient boosting and also XGBoost. How do you explain that why is XGBoost your winner model? Just because you have more connectivity, or maybe you might have worked in earlier projects on XGBoost is the reason why you chose XGBoost, because it would be better for model explainability part? Not really. You help the interviewer understand that you understand the pros and cons. Like how Ritik just mentioned. I think if you're a fresher, you would never help understand how that works in the production, and you might not have pointers. But few of us here might have experience, and you might have seen that, the time complexity or the space complexity or the processing complexity is much better in XGBoost as compared to others. It works better. The other gradient boosting might need more processors. You might or you might not know these answers if you have not worked on production environment, but all you know if you are a fresher is what works better, what is the pro and what is the con of XGBoost. You can strategically place that answer when somebody asks why is that a winning model or why is that a best model for you. Yeah. um okay, Prabir asks a good question here. Does the interviewer study the GitHub profile thoroughly? um to be honest, as an interviewer myself, I would say that we get your resume maybe a day before, or say just half an hour before, and I might actually before the interview just go through it 5 minutes or 10 minutes before. Not really, but again, if I like the candidate and if I see a potential in the candidate, I would then after the interview maybe go through the GitHub profile and understand what you just talked about, or what you just said, that you worked upon so and so projects. Have you actually done that or not? How did you do it? If say you talked about, say you had 4 projects on your resume, and one project is something that very much resonated with me, and that is exactly what my team is also solving, I would actually want to know what was your approach, and if that approach makes sense or not. So hence we always talk about putting in a readme file, talking about the data in your file or the things that you use, because maybe I might not go through the entire line by line in your code, but maybe through the readme or maybe through the just the structure, I could understand that this guy can write production based code, or this person has a potential to write a production grade, all the classes, or say nicely encapsulated code in that format. So it all depends whether before the interview or after the interview. It's primarily usually after the interview, if that person actually is really interested in your project, and it just gives you an added advantage, I would say. Yeah, same question Lakshmi asks, will the interviewer check GitHub repository for the mentioned project? Again, if you've done a really good job and you've cracked the interview, the interviewer is already convinced, and now he wants to know whether you are an effective fit or are you just somebody who will just take up a junior role. It's more basis on just to understand your skill set and how you fit in the bigger picture. So GitHub is important, and it actually, all talk but no play or no action will just get you in trouble. Because how do you say, like, say suppose even if you've said that I have worked upon it, how do you actually say that, you how will you prove it? The minute your GitHub profile is all open, that is when I understand that you're not just all talk, you're actually all action as well. All right. May you share a demo video where you would have explained the project so it will help to know in depth. Sure, we can try, Deepak. Maybe today's session was something that could help you understand how to explain the project. We just discussed that in the entire way. Not sure if you joined midway or halfway or not. All right, I'll take one last question. Iram asks, I should have done a Big Mart sales prediction for my. I should have done a project in on Big Mart sales prediction for my college. What approach should I follow to explain my project? Guys, we have similar questions and we've been discussing the same things over and over again. I think after I share this presentation, try to go through it, try to understand how do you get Emma's approach and Rachel's approach together and get a framework that might be able to understand. But when you talk about the college projects, I just have one thing to say here, guys. College project meaning, that you have stipulated amount of time. That if you are talking in a college decorum or your final project or your major project, that you have 20 minutes, you have 30 minutes. The time stipulated is aware. Your audience, so two problems already solved there. So when you talk about in your this, you already know how much time you want to denote to say the EDA part. How much time you can denote to the model execution part or the deployment part. So just to go back, I think so the more context part that we were discussing this, so you are very much aware how much time you need to stipulate. Is the reason why I had drawn this flow chart, is basically just understand the sequence is now clear after this chart. Now you are the one to decide how much time you want to dedicate to everything. Say you have 30 minutes to talk about your entire project in colleges, so you can dedicate how much time you want to talk about. The more interesting facts you have about that particular module, say model creation mein sabse zyada interesting facts you had, you talk about that more. Talk about what makes you confident, talk about what you think can be more engaging to the audience. Okay. um all right, Sarthak asks, there are myriad of algorithms, so is it mandatory to remember each and every algorithm for interview? Because I get confused about them. Not at all. Not at all. Like, understand how the classification problems can be solved, understand how regression can be solved, and understand how the unsupervised can be solved. Till date, I right now, after having a 6 years experience, might not know every algorithm because there are new developments coming in the market every day. Say, by when I started studying, there was no ADA boost or there was no CAT boost or any of these classifiers. All we had was hyperparameterize them and just make a better result. Again, you are not expected to know everything. It's a ocean of data science, and you might just want to explore and understand few of them. But if say you are saying that I know linear regression, that's the only algorithm that I know, you should know the algorithm in and out. You should not, then you cannot say that no, I don't know about the lasso part, but you can ask me about the rich part. That doesn't work like that. Then you need to know the entire part and understand how did you do it. So choose your algorithms wisely. Don't put in fancy keywords just because you wanted to put in fancy keywords. Choose only something that you can talk about end to end. All right. Yashank, do we have some more time, or is that something that, because I know you guys have a group discussion right after this, and I wouldn't want to take much of your break time again. But anybody who wants to leave can leave. Anybody who still feels like asking few more questions can just drop in your questions. And yeah, so Mayank asks, all right, we have to, let's not spill over the time, but we'll just take last Mayank's question. As we know, data is the most important entity, but I came to know that the data we use is our capstone or any other project is far different from what data scientists or machine learning engineers use in their day-to-day life. That's true. I searched a lot, but I cannot get the proper and concrete answer from the internet. So what's the question? The question is, we know the data is the most important, but I came to know that, what's the question here, Mayank? I'm not sure, but if that is something that you want affirmation on, yeah, I think the real life data is very, very different from what we actually say. So there's a good meme that, a small cat, and then it's written that iris data set, and there's a huge tiger, and then that is written that real life data sets. Yeah, I think the entire objective for AlmaBetter to give you a clean data set, or say suppose easier or a not that complex data sets, is basically for you to understand how do you apply the concepts rather than just dwelling into the data. In real life, yeah, you spend majority of your time in the area part, the feature engineering part, and the selection part. But for AlmaBetter, you need to have a encapsulated project where you can apply all the learnings or all the classes that you have learned about the few algorithms. That's the reason why you get such kind of data sets. But if you are interested in working upon as a hobby or a passion or a side part where you want to work on complex projects, there's always a lot of data sets available online that you can always fetch in and start working on it. But from Alma Better point of view, or the caption project's point of view, I think that's the objective, to implement as much as you can. So I think I have got a strict background that I have to end it, because you guys have to jump on the group discussions. So I think my overall ending lines, or the overall, I would just summarize it, that the key is always interact with the interviewer, make it a conversation rather than a report. Definitely, like that's how you can keep the interviewer engaged, so that they can understand and digest your project in a limited amount of time. So I hope with what we learned today, in you can happen to practice at least some of it. And once you happen to actually implement this in your narratives, trust me, you would outperform a lot of candidates out there. So again, let me know if you have any questions on the suggestions I made today or the framework that we discussed, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. I am on Slack or anywhere that you want to put in. Thank you so much for joining in. Really great questions, and I hope I could answer a few of them. And yeah, have a good Saturday. Yeah, I think I will stop in.